Welcome to the State of Legends podcast. I'm Michael.
I'm Dylan.
And we're starting a new podcast. It's going to be about cryptids, crimes, conspiracies, all by state basis. I guess we're going to try to post new episodes each week. How'd you get interested in cryptids and conspiracies, Dylan?
Scary stories. I grew up without the internet and without cable. So we lived near Goatman, so my grandpa used to try to scare me with the Goatman.
The Goatman. I don't even think I heard of the Goatman when I was younger. There was a lot of Bigfoot, a lot of TV shows about Bigfoot, Jersey Devil, stuff like that.
I only knew about Bigfoot because of Harry and the Hendersons.
That was a good show.
Mm-hmm. Chupacabra because we went to South Texas a lot.
I actually told my parents back when I was young that I wanted to be a cryptozoologist, which they thought I was crazy. But here I am today.
Hey, there's money in it now.
Yeah. I think what we're going to start with Texas. And if you're in Texas, close to us, and you have a little history with, let's start with the Goatman of Old Alton Bridge.
Of course, when it was built, it was just Alton Bridge.
Yeah, not the old. It's older now. Oh. Let's hear a little bit about the Goatman, his origin story. Like, where does Goatman come from?
So like most cryptids, there's different origin stories, different legends. So we're going to go through probably the most popular ones just for Denton, Texas, because there are goatmen all across America.
The one at Denton. That's okay. So we have a bridge. We have a Goatman. He just showed up one day, or was
The most popular story is actually kind of a tragic one.
that's usually how they start.
Yeah.
Some sort of tragic revenge, probably.
The most famous origin story, it starts with a black farmer and entrepreneur by the name of Oscar Washburn. It was about in the 1930s, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right.
He would tend to the goats that were near the bridge, for their cheese, for their meat, basically just, farmer stuff, trying to survive. Well, he hung up a sign on the bridge stating, "This way to the Goatman." Well, the local KKK, they were, needless to say, they were a little upset about that.
Not fond with that, huh?
No.
Surprise.
Surprise, surprise. And they wanted to try to make an example out of him. So they decided to go to his house and kidnap him. And they decide, hey, what should we do for a little bit of irony here? Let's hang him from the bridge that he loved so much. And that's what they did. But it turns out, when they went down to investigate, there was nothing on the news. The water under the bridge seemed undisrupted, as if he just didn't fall in. He just completely disappeared.
Well, I'm sure that was a shock to him. I wonder what they did next.
Well, it's funny you should ask that. They were a little irrational, to say the least. They went to his house and burned it to the ground with his family in it. Tried to lure him out, I guess.
That seems pretty on par with the things they would do.
Yeah, they're knuckleheads, to say the least.
So burned his house. Looks like it's burned his house with his family in it.
Yeah, they were trying to lure him out and bait him out, but he didn't show up that night. But supposedly, he became a spirit of vengeance, to say the least, and he would take revenge on those that wronged him by the bridge, I think more or less.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere it was if you went over the bridge and you had blood of one of those Klansmen, that's who he would take. He would leave some people alone. Kind of like a revenge through generations, I guess. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, I can't be mad at that,
No. And then...
I hold a grudge, so...
Yeah, sounds
Somebody cuts me off in traffic, I get that mad.
Cut you off in traffic, and then I hope your grandkids pay for it, huh? Yeah, that makes... I kind of agree with that.
Yeah.
Looks like there's also another less popular origin story. One, because this is the Goatman of Old Alton Bridge, and this story started in 1860 before the bridge was even there. So I guess it would just be the Goatman of the creek. If there's no bridge. It says that a group of cowboys lynched a Creole slave goat herder named Jack Kendall from a tree near Hickory Creek, which is a creek that runs under where the bridge was eventually built. But this story is pretty graphic. Kendall's head came off in the lynching, he reanimated and tore the head off of a nearby goat and shoved that goat's head on his body. That's
a little extreme.
Yeah, that's pretty extreme.
Goat
there.
didn't do anything to him, but hey, when you're mad, you're mad.
Yeah. I mean, if you want somebody hung you and you were pissed off, you'd rip a head off a goat and stick it on your own body. You'd let people know you're upset.
Now, notice these stories are both really similar. And if you look up either of these men, you're not going to find any like real history, real census records or anything like that. And I think that's kind of telling of the Goatman, and how we all know of the Goatman is through tales and legends.
Yeah, I think so too. I think most of these stories, they kind of need a name just to pass along to people, to give sort of a face to some of these stories.
If I were to compare it to a movie, it would probably be Candyman.
Yeah.
Because in the newest Candyman, he doesn't have just one form. It's multiple men who were wronged.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Goatman and the Candyman are similar in that era, method, whatever you want to say.
Let's see. So if I was going to, this bridge is in Denton, Texas. If I was going to go down there and find this Goatman, I mean, I just show up and say, "Hey, Goatman, come out here and check me out. What's the deal? How to get this Goatman to show up?"
Well, since it's a legend, since it's a historical legend, it's taken on, once again, bring it back to Candyman. You say Candyman's name 5 times in the mirror, it happens. You say Bloody Mary's name 3 times in the mirror, it happens. With this one, it said if you knock on the bridge 3 times, he shows up. Another way is go. Another way is show up and turn off your headlights and honk 3 times.
So pull up, honk, knock. I guess if you do both of them, even better chance.
See, I think with the headlights and honk 3 times, I think that goes back to the urban legends from the Lovers Hills in the 50s, where you're in your car, you and somebody, your little sweetie, making out, and then you hear a hook scratch on your car. Because it seems to be most legends that have that connotation of you do this in your car, you do that in your car. They all date back to urban legends like that.
Yeah. All these legends seem like they kind of adjust the moral compass of people. They try to, let's do all these wrong things. Let's do this right thing, or this big bad boogeyman's going to get you.
With the way of it, I see it as too, it's like what my grandpa did to me, how I found out about Goatman, is to scare your kids. Whether you're trying to scare them into being good, or you're just trying to scare them to mess with them.
Yeah.
I guess most urban legends.
That would definitely get you to listen if you were a little kid and like, hey, go to bed, or this half goat, half man's going to come in there and rip you apart.
See, yeah, my grandpa, he's got a very funny sense of humor on him. And we'd go to the lake at night and get firewood during the wintertime. And we'd be driving in a pickup, and he'd be telling me the story. And he'd make it so personal and so real. He'd say, yeah, 2 friends of mine. And he would even name them. Childhood friends, like people he's known his whole life.
Gotta have the details.
He's like, they were driving on this very lake road. And I'm 5 years old. I'm like, oh yeah? And he said that they smelled a very rotten stench. Because, this is Texas. Our windows are down. We're out getting wood at the lake. We're redneck. And he told me his friends are smelling this stench, and all of a sudden, bang, roof of their pickup, and they see a Goatman. About the time of that story, I'm not looking at him. I'm fully invested. I'm scared. I'm 5. He slaps his hand on the roof of the pickup as hard as he can. And he acts. This man should have been an actor, because he's like, oh, we gotta go. We gotta get out of here now. And he would lay down on the gas of that pickup and drive off.
Hey, maybe he didn't slap the hood. maybe he really was a Goatman there. Who knows?
I didn't sleep that night. Did not sleep that night.
So what does a Goatman even look like? Is this guy like I assume he's half goat, half man. Is he?
Yeah, that's pretty safe
talking
assumption.
Top half goat, bottom half man, vice versa?
I think it just depends on who's telling the story, honestly. Because
see him running, it looks like a goat from behind, and coming at you looks like a goat coming at you, huh?
I've heard tales of it scaring people that are religious over the years, because they portray it as Baphomet.
Well, it definitely has some demonic looking looks to it. I mean, you think of a goat, you think of something demonic, and especially in Christian religion.
But me, as a kid, I had a weird imagination. I pictured like a straight up man, but more of a sheep man. very fluffy, very stinky.
So you had the cute version of the
Yeah,
goat
well,
man,
see,
huh?
he didn't have the people picture the big goat horns. I pictured like the nubs, little like the nub goat horns.
Each person can have their own interpretation of a goat man. So.
I grew up with goats, petting zoos and stuff.
Hey, your
I
goat
love-
man, your goat man's no less than my goat man. So, but half goat, half man. Let's see.
All
head of-
legend.
Most of them head of a goat, I would assume.
That's got to be a given,
Yeah.
unless you're picturing like the Chronicles of Narnia
Yeah, he could have a head,
Hey,
a normal head, and then
with the
out of
horns.
it.
He could just be Mr. Tumnus.
Yeah, and then we'll assume legs of a goat. That seemed like that would be a thing. The whole decaying flesh. I mean, I guess that's pretty common.
That's a little off-putting, honestly.
Yeah.
And especially you think about it, you're scared as a kid, and like I said, grow up out in the country. You're driving out in the woods. You're doing whatever. There's hunters out there. There's wild animals out there. Growing up in the South, in particular, you get so used to seeing roadkill, and so you smell it. But if you're a kid, and you smell it, and you're like, "Oh, is that the goat man?
That's the goat
Is that
man.
the goat man?"
Is that a dead raccoon or is that the goat man coming for us?
Could be both.
Could be. Goat man of Texas. It looks, well, I guess this one is Texas, but the goat man seems like there's some stories from other states. I mean, it seems like there's quite a few places that have some version of a goat man.
This one thing about the United States is we share cryptids with our fellow statesmen.
Each state has a cryptid. They have the same version, but it's just a little bigger, a little meaner.
All different stories, and that's the thing about tall tales and urban legends, and that's why we really started this podcast. Tell the stories about it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Well, the real cool thing about it is there's actually he might still do it. I could be wrong, but there's a local man in Denton who dresses like the goat man and goes to that bridge, and it's like it's a little fun thing. He's not doing it.
I've seen that. I've seen there was a guy who did that. He actually, I think that thing I read, he said somebody pulled a knife on him. I mean, which, hey, to be fair, you got a guy, because I think he said he wore stilts and, full regalia of it. And
if you've been to Denton, a man pulling a knife on a man dressed as a goat, that's not that shocking.
No, it's not. I mean, who hasn't pulled a knife on a goat? I mean, that seems.
Hey, a couple of beers is a couple of beers.
So what do you think about the goat man? You think this goat man is this real? Could there be a goat man?
As I get older, I become more skeptic of things. It's very skeptical. Like, watching X-Files, I was very much a Mulder, if we're doing it in X-Files terms. I believed in just about everything. I even believed in the Loch Ness Monster. But the older I get, the more I'm like Scully. Because we live in the age of internet where almost anything can be proven or disproven.
Yeah. My experience with X-Files was I would go to sleep and the TV would be on, and then back then there wasn't a lot of channels. I would wake up in the middle of the night, or say 12 or 1 o'clock, and it was always reruns of X-Files. So I'm waking up and I'm hearing that music thinking, what in the world is going on?
I hate that.
Yeah.
But even though I'm skeptical, I'm also a fan of X-Files, and as they say, I want to believe.
The Goat Man, whether he's real or not, it's a good story. It's funny, interesting. You can scare kids with it. What about, it seems like they should make a movie or something of this. Surely they've got some Goat Man movies.
It's funny you should say that, because there's quite a bit of Goat Man movies.
I think there was a movie, I think I seen one that was on Tubi.
It has to be Tubi. It's always Tubi.
I've never seen this, but I would just assume these are some kind of B, C tier horror movies.
Tubi is like the Sci-Fi Channel for streaming. If there's a cryptid, there's a movie about it. And it's going to have the funniest effects, the funniest actors. And the movie in particular I'm thinking of is actually very new. It's called Goatman. Just Goatman.
Just Goatman.
It's directed by Trey Murphy, and it's on Tubi. You can rent it on Prime Video, and it looks like it's not very well regarded.
I wouldn't think so.
But hey, I like movies like that.
The title, straight to the point, Goatman. You know what you're getting. You're getting a Goatman.
It came out last year, and if that tells you anything, people are still talking about the Goatman. to this day. And that's what makes him a legend.
Yeah. I agree. I don't really know if there's a Goatman hanging out there or not. I would assume probably not. But hey, maybe one day we'll be down there. We can go knock on the old iron bridge and find out.
One of us will get out and knock. The braver one will get out and knock, and then the other one will stay in the car and do the honk.
No,
We do it that way.
You can knock and I'll hold the knife. Yeah, I think that's about it for the Goatman. I mean, it's definitely a cool story. I mean, just, we could have done Everybody Has Bigfoot. We could have done all kinds of cryptids. We're trying to do a little bit different stories. Something if you were coming to Texas looking for something different. A Goatman, you might not have heard of that. It might be something different for you to find.
Yeah, because, there's even been, alleged chupacabra sightings in Texas, but I feel like everybody and their mothers know about chupacabra.
Yeah, I think so.
That was I was growing up watching cartoons like The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. They did a whole entire episode on the chupacabra.
Right. But you didn't ever see anything about the Goatman back then.
But little fun fact there, chupacabra is roughly translates to goat sucker of goats. Hey, so
maybe there's a lot of them, and that's why there's not very many Goatmen. Kind of thinned them out down there. Well, let's move on to another Texas legend.
This is a more realistic legend because this is confirmed to have been a real man, but the story around him is not 100% on the record. We don't know if this is fact. This is another story spread through stories.
But we can actually go back and trace this person. This is Joe Ball, the Alligator Man, the Butcher of Elmendorf.
The Bluebeard of Texas. That's probably my favorite one.
Bluebeard
of Texas.
But we can go back. We can find this man actually existed. Whether what he did or didn't do, maybe it's a little up in the air, but we know for sure there was a Joe Ball in South Texas.
And that's why this is the State of Legends podcast, because we're going through the legends.
Let's see. Joe Ball, born January 7th, 1896. So we're back there a ways, huh?
Yeah, 100 years before I was born.
That's a while back. But it doesn't make his crimes, his actions any more insignificant. There's bad dudes back in the 1800s, so. Well,
what's crazy about this one is I didn't even know this man existed until we started doing this podcast.
I didn't either. It seems, he was born to parents that had a wealthy cotton business and a general store. Not a lot to say about somebody, which, in the 1890s, you're not going to really probably know. They don't have Facebook to post their status every day or Twitter or should I say X to let everybody know what's going on.
Twitter till I die.
But it appears Joe, he enlisted in the Army. And then in 1919, he received an honorable discharge.
See, there's a funny thing here. It says he was described as a good shot by one of his nephews. See, I just think that's funny because it's like, what's your nephew going to be like talking trash? Yeah. Especially when you're built like Joe Ball. You feel like, my uncle's a bad shot.
Yeah, he wasn't much to talk about, but...
His nephew seemed to like him.
Yeah, let's see. After that... I guess he didn't want to join the business. He didn't want to go in the cotton business, the general store business. He had no interest. At that time, we had the Prohibition era. So him apparently being a capitalist, he wanted to jump into bootlegging.
That era, say what you want about it, but we got dirt racing from that era.
Hey, NASCAR, straight from the bootleggers.
We got some of the best cars known to man from that era.
A lot of stuff came out of Prohibition except for the actual prohibition of alcohol. It kind of came on back, It worked out for other stuff, not for that.
Hey, you can't keep a Southerner from getting their whiskey.
Let's see. We sold whiskey out of a 50-gallon barrel out of a Model A.
Dang.
Apparently hired some handyman, Clifton Wheeler, to help basically run the business, I guess, so he could kind of sit back, relax. So I guess he was a little bit like his parents, start a successful business and then you move on, let somebody else kind of work it for you, reap the rewards.
Man, names back then were so to the point. It's like Clifton Wheeler. Yeah. That just screamed. I could see a Harrison Ford movie. About a Clifton Wheeler.
Old Clifton Wheeler, handyman of 1920.
Handyman, bootlegger extraordinaire.
But let's see. A little problem with the bootlegging business was the prohibition ended, so not a lot of bootleggers needed when there's no prohibition.
No one, you don't need to bootleg.
But if you're in that business, you have a little bit about liquor, about sales. I guess the next thing to really do is just open up a tavern, open up a bar.
Of course.
The Sociable Inn, which that's kind of a catchy name,
That's not bad. I've heard way worse bar names.
I have too.
It ain't no Margaritaville.
He could have just called it Joe's. Joe, in an effort to draw in a few customers, it looks like he dug a hole behind his bar, made sort of a concrete pond back there, and naturally, if you have a concrete pond in South Texas, you'd want to fill it with some alligators. I mean, why not?
That, to somebody who isn't from the South or even from like the West, Midwest, that sounds absolutely crazy. But growing up, one of my favorite things to do when we would go on road trips is to stop at weird gas stations, and they always had something like this. I used to go to this gas station that would have roaming peacocks, and they would sell ninja stars, knives, and pickled eggs.
I remember coming back as a kid from Louisiana to visit a few friends of ours, and we stopped at an alligator farm. I mean, that's all it was just alligators, and you went and checked them out. I mean, I can see what the draw is.
The dogs of the South, as they're called by me.
We're dogs of the South.
I don't know if y'all know, but Joe doesn't seem to be that good of a guy, because it seems he would toss cats, dogs, and other animals into the pit for excitement of the bar patrons.
So it wasn't just the thought of seeing an alligator. It's kind of like when you go to a zoo and you put in a quarter and get the fish feed to throw to the koi. You bring your own cat, dog, something, whatever you can gather up.
Yeah, we just go to the petting zoo and feed the pellets to the goats. I don't know.
Well, bring something from home.
You ever bring it back to movies? You ever seen Lake Placid?
Yeah.
Betty White, feed the cows to the gators. Seeing old sweet little Betty White, feed the cows to the gators. Ain't that different than seeing Joe Ball throwing a dog with the gator dogs?
Seems like old Joe had a pretty good handle on these alligators, but looks like what he didn't have a good handle on is the women in his life. He had some issues there. I guess he had a fondness for picking waitresses, and then he seems like he kind of just fell in love with them one right after another.
He would have loved Hooters.
He hired a waitress named Minnie. 1934, he hired Minnie, which he fell in love with her, got in a relationship with her. It lasted 3 years.
Tell me her last name isn't Gotthard.
It looks like Minnie Gotthard.
It looks like Joe Gotthard. Hey-o.
Hey. Joe hired him another waitress, Dolores Goodwin. He decided to go ahead and fall in love with her, too.
So yep. Joe was a romantic.
Then, 1937, got a new waitress, Hazel Brown. What do you think happened there?
I'm going to guess he fell in love.
Fell in love again.
Lover boy Joe.
He was a hopeless romantic. It had to be.
I'm thinking about this. This is a little off topic here. This man's name was Joe. He had plenty of lovers at the same time. He had exotic animals. We had another Joe like that down south, too.
Reminds me of somebody else we know.
A king of tigers.
Old Joe Exotic.
This here's the Gator King, it seems.
The Gator King of South Texas. 1937, that's when he fell in love with his last waitress. So
it says here he was involved with 3 of them at the same time.
3 at the same time. 3 women at the same time, and you all work with all 3 of them. Seems a little stressful there. But it didn't last too long, the stress, because naturally, all 3 of them disappeared.
I mean, I guess, it worked in Joe's benefit, but I don't really see that being very well for the 3 that disappeared.
Well, I guess all 3 of them didn't disappear right off the bat. He had actually got married to Dolores.
Oh, okay.
They actually got married first. I mean, he's still, I don't know if he's still with the other 2. 1938, Dolores had a car accident. She lost her arm. That's when the rumors started. Alligators bit her arm off.
Are we really tracing this back to Tiger King?
I think so. I mean, it has a lot of the same issues here.
History repeats itself.
Love quarrels, missing arms.
Financially recovering is not an option for men named Joe.
Well, that's after she lost her arm. That's when she disappeared. So that makes all three of them. Her family, they were a little more worried about her. They went to the sheriff, and the sheriff, they kind of dismissed him as a suspect. They couldn't find any hard evidence. A few months later after that, he had another waitress. Let's guess what happened to her. Disappeared.
Joe.
He's not having a real great run with them.
He's good at rizzing them up, but he ain't good at keeping them.
Can't hold them down.
Sounds like Joe's the one that can't be held down. This man is a country song. He's a walking country song.
Looks like the police came and questioned Joe about this gal too. Julie Turner was her name. They said they couldn't find anything about her there, so no evidence. He's free again. Finally, a neighbor of his said he'd seen Joe cutting meat from a human body, feeding it to his own alligators. Then another man stated Joe had stashed a barrel behind his house that smelled like rotting meat. So that seems like a little bit of evidence.
It's a little questionable. It's just a little, and I noticed that all these girls that went missing, they all worked at the sociable inn. I don't think that's a good place to work.
No, I won't.
I don't think there's any health benefits there.
I would have to check their insurance for sure.
Yeah.
Life insurance policy. You wouldn't think they'd have one there.
No. Gators seem to turn out just fine, though.
So after all this, finally, the sheriff's deputies, they finally have a little bit of evidence. So, of course, they're going to go to the sociable inn. They're going to question old Joe. He asked the sheriff, this is what the story said, he asked the sheriff if he could close up the bar, and they told him yes. He went to the register, slapped the no-sell button, pulled out a .45, and then shot himself in the chest. Maybe he was guilty, maybe not. But seems pretty questionable if you're going to shoot yourself when the cops are questioning you. That's kind of seems like...
Going to commit unalive right in front of the cops. I mean, maybe he was just terrified of police. He was a bootlegger.
He could have. More evidence was he actually had rotten meat and an axe covered with blood and hair near the alligator pit.
Oh, that's pretty damning. I ain't going to lie. I mean, I don't know what excuse you can make there.
No, that seems like concrete evidence. Well, since everyone else in his life has disappeared, all the women that worked for him, they're all gone. Everybody kind of just disappears. They're going to question Clifton Wheeler, his old handyman.
Old Cliffy Wheels.
From the bootlegging days. Wheeler, he denied, of course. He finally admitted later that Joe had killed Hazel and Minnie. Wheeler actually said he was forced to help Joe. He said he had to help him dispose of the bodies.
And Clifton sounds like a good friend, honestly. I mean,
he said that basically him and Joe had, I think one part I read said he was helping Joe cut up bodies, and the stench was so bad that they were in between vomiting. But Joe would sit there and just have to get drunker and drunker, and he was, of course, scared of Joe, so he helped him, and then both were buried at different beaches. He'd never said anything about actually feeding these bodies to the alligators.
This all happened near San Antonio too, didn't it?
Yeah, just sort of south of San Antonio.
San Antonio Joe.
Surprise, surprise, Joe's wife, Dolores. They find her in California. She stated Joe never fed anybody to alligators. He never killed more than the two people. She knew about those. That all the other stuff was basically rumors. Other people, I think they eventually found one other girl that had worked at his bar. They found her later on. Clifton Wheeler, he actually ended up pleading guilty to help of disposing the bodies. He got 2 years in jail.
That's not a bad sentence. I mean, you ain't there that long.
No. And then the alligators, of course, they were donated to San Antonio Zoo. So they moved on from possibly eating human flesh to, I don't know what San Antonio Zoo would feed them.
And gators can live a long time, too, so there's no telling how long they had them at that zoo.
Hey, they could have descendants of those same alligators. Could still be.
To this day, you can go see the Joe Gators.
Hey.
Joe Gator legacy.
we really don't know. Did Joe kill? There's reports from 2 people to 20 people. He killed some because otherwise he's not going to shoot himself.
Just like the Goatman, Joe is somebody who's told through everybody. You hear about him through word of mouth. And it's going to be embellished how he killed people, who he killed.
What's surprising to me is that it's not really a super popular story, or at least, I mean, not in the northern part of Texas.
I'm wondering if maybe growing up in South Texas you hear about it a lot more.
You'd almost have to.
Texas is so big that it's almost like 2 different places. South Texas and North Texas aren't even like, and then like East and West Texas. It's like completely different climates, people. It's like its own thing.
I mean, this has all the good elements. I mean, missing people, alligators, a crazy way to kill people, disposing them of the different ways. I mean, this just seems like this would have gained a little more traction. And like you said, it could be more popular. We just might be out of the loop. This was the first time I'd ever heard of this story, though, and it was definitely interesting.
It definitely sounds like a story of its time. It just, like the era, it just screams 30s. The crime feels very 30s. The man himself seems very 30s.
But I honestly don't think of people in the 30s owning alligators. If you would have told me this was 1970, I would have been, oh, yeah, that kind of makes sense, you know. You got an alligator, get a tiger, you know, get lots of exotics. I mean, but 30s, it is a little strange for alligators.
Joe was ahead of his time.
It sounds like it. What else you got anything to say about the Joe Ball, the Alligator Man?
Not to be that guy, not to bring it back to movies, but I'm bringing it back to movies. Texas Chainsaw Massacre director Tobe Hooper, who, by the way, is a native Texan, he made a film, I believe, right after Texas Chainsaw Massacre, actually, 2 years after, called Eaten Alive. It's about a man who ran a hotel or a motel and would feed patrons to his gators. It was inspired by Joe Ball, which brings it back to another funny thing here, kind of connecting it to the legends and the tall tales of our podcast. As a kid, I'd never seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I knew all about Leatherface because my friends had me convinced he was real. Because I don't know if you remember or not, in the 2003 movie, at the very end, there's a picture of his face, and it's like, this is the last known picture of the killer known as, and he wasn't even a Sawyer in that one. He was a Hewitt, Tommy Hewitt. And I thought that was real because every movie started with based on true events because he based him off of Ed Gein. So it's just funny that he makes a movie inspired by real events that's also hyper fictionalized.
Yeah. Him being a native Texan and knowing the story, then I guess at least some of Texas knew this story. It was popular somewhere. So we know Joe Ball was real. We know he killed some people. Those are facts. But how many? I want to lean towards a higher number. If you're going to shoot a couple women in the head that you basically fell in love with and were your employees, I'm just going to assume you probably killed more people. And I'm going to assume you probably threw a little bit the Gators' way. Why not? They're already right there. You can't carry everybody out and bury them all in the sand.
Clifton Wheeler can only do so much.
Yeah.
But, reading about how he was, I don't even think I'd call him a serial killer. He doesn't seem to have the tendencies of some of our more famous and well-known serial killers. Matter of fact, him getting sick from disposing of the bodies and whatnot, that kind of seems to me like a giveaway that he wasn't doing it in the same ways that Bundy would do it. Or Dahmer would do it.
He didn't seem like somebody who was going out seeking to kill somebody. He just seems like a bad dude who was kind of took the opportunity, wants to move on from this. The Goatman was more of a few people know that. It's not quite as popular. Joe Ball doesn't seem like near as popular. But our last story, I think we should let's do something that about everybody's heard of.
Just about everybody. And this one we probably don't even have to spend so much time on because there's so much put out about this. You can find YouTube videos, documentaries, fictional movies, everything.
But if we're going to be a podcast about cryptids, crimes, conspiracies, it's hard not to put the siege at Waco in because there's a lot of controversial elements to that.
And it's one of the biggest things in Texas history, I would say. I mean, you can't drive through Waco without thinking about it. Or, hey, that shootout at the Twin Peaks, but that's a whole different thing.
If you have one person's name associated basically with a whole town, they're both tied that closely together. I mean, it's kind of a big story. But let's talk about Waco. The Branch Davidians, that's what they called themselves. How were they founded?
So they have a very long, very deep history. But I think for time's sake, for brevity's sake, we should just start with the founding of the Branch Davidians themselves and not who they split from, who founded them, so on and so on. So if we're really going to start anywhere, I think the best time to start would be 1955 with a man by the name of Benjamin Roden.
The Branch Davidians, because I guess they had numerous names. There's Branch Davidians, there's Davidians, Branch Davidians, they had all sorts of random names.
By the end of it, I don't even think they were full-on Branch Davidians anymore. I think they were just, Koreshians?
I think at the end that's what he wanted, was Koreshians is what he wanted to be called.
When we get to David Koresh, he's a branch off of the branch off of the branch off.
It's a lot of branches.
There's a whole tree here.
Yeah, we got a tree, a forest of Davidians here.
So from what I can gather is that Benjamin Roden had different views with the group that he was with to begin with, which I don't even think it was the original Seventh-day Adventist. I think it was a spinoff of them.
So that's what it was, a shoot off. Seventh-day Adventist, this Branch Davidian was an offshoot of that.
And this is a more apocalyptic cult. You know, they really believed in that the end of days was right there, right around the corner. They truly believed that they knew they had a connection, everything.
Well, that seems like it's pretty on par for most of these cults. They're looking at the end, and it's always near.
And every leader of it believes he's in contact with God, that he is the second coming, anything like that. And honestly, I feel like they actually believed that they were. They believed what they preached. But they were also, I think, doing it to get a little extra power. But that's just me thinking. Power with his cohorts.
So we had Benjamin Roden. He's controlling Mount Carmel Center. That's what the place was called. I guess there was an old Mount Carmel Center, a new Mount Carmel Center. I think at the end it was called Mount Carmel. Different versions of the same name.
Yeah, it looks like they built Mount Carmel after the founder of the Davidian Seventh-day Adventists died, Victor Hotef. He died in 1935, and that's when the community built the Mount Carmel Center.
It said his wife, Florence, was the one who took control of everything. She sold the Mount Carmel. And she actually was, after he died, she would have been the prophet or the leader. And
which there's a pattern here with these two, because after Benjamin Roden died, his wife was in charge.
So then she sort of become the next prophet.
Yeah, and the funny thing with her is, when she was in her 60s, our biggest subject shows up in their life here. A man named Vernon Howell.
Vernon Howell. That's a name that's not familiar with this story. Vernon Howell, I guess, would better be known as Mr. David Koresh.
When it comes to cult leaders, I really feel like if you want to call any of them rock stars, you got Charles Manson and David Koresh, because these men were musicians.
Not rock stars. We're not saying,
they're so cool.
Yeah, not like that. These dudes had guitars.
Actual musicians.
They're musicians. They're at the bar playing, which I don't know why you would look towards a so-called new prophet. Is you just catch him down at the bar? I mean... back in the day, would he been down there at Joe Ball's throwing cats to the alligators?
Been singing My Sharona.
My Sharona. Oh, so he shows up. Vernon Howell. We'll call him Vernon Howell right now because he doesn't change his name till apparently later. So
Dave Koresh was he was in bed with Lois Roden.
Oh.
She's in her 60s. He's in his 20s or 30s, and man knows what he likes.
So he was a little bit of a ladies' man, too, it appears.
Yeah, this man he really thought he was Bret Michaels.
I guess earlier we should have checked in the love life of the Goatman. We didn't even see who he was checking out.
No, it was him and the bridge. The bridge was the Goatman's wife.
A monogamous Goatman with the old Alton Bridge.
Now, like when I say this dude he acted like he was a rock star. He really thought he was Axl Rose or Bret Michaels.
He says, it says that he got into a shootout with George Roden.
Yeah, so George Roden is the son of Lois Roden and Benjamin Roden.
So he has a shootout with him and his followers. They basically just kind of take control of it.
So the reason leading up to it, George was told, I think, his whole life that he was going to be the Messiah, the leader. He was going to lead them through it. But then you get old Vernon Howell here making his mom feel different ways. And Vern is getting to teach his teachings, and his teachings are a little different than George's. George is already established. George has been here teaching. But you get this new dude over here sharing a bed with your mom, and he's teaching differently.
Yeah, I think you would have a little bit of an issue if you were thinking you're the heir to the Davidian cult, and you got this long-haired rock star coming in banging your mom.
It's literally George Roden is David Lee Roth, David Koresh is Sammy Hagar. He comes in and he's like, "What is this dude doing?
I'm taking over." I guess Hal here, Koresh, he starts signing documents claiming to be the president of the branch Davidians. So he's already kind of playing this stuff out. That kind of leads up into this shooting where they kind of take control of Mount Carmel. And then that's when in 1990 he finally changes his name. He changes it to David Koresh.
This man was I will say he was very charismatic, like most cult leaders. I mean, the shootout itself, he went to court for it, and it seemed like they loved him. Everybody in court loved him, and it drove George insane. Allegedly, he went crazy in that courtroom. They had to hold him in contempt of court.
I think you would have to be somewhat charismatic if you're going to be a cult leader and try to get even 10 or 15 people to follow you. You're going to have to be pretty charismatic because, I mean, I could go outside and say, "Hey, I need help mowing the grass today." You think I'm going to convince anybody? Probably not.
This man showed up to a group of already established people who already had these established beliefs that their current leader was Jesus himself. And this man shows up and is like, "No, I'm Jesus." And he gets these people to believe him. What if I went to a 7-Eleven parking lot and told people I'm Jesus? I would end up on World Star Hip Hop.
Well, if you had enough bravado, you'd have people walking out of the 7-Eleven with their hot dogs and slushies and getting in your van with you.
One of my favorite things about this, though, is after he won that trial about the shootout, he took everybody out for ice cream. He said, "Back to my place. We're having ice cream."
Hey, we're all winners around here, huh?
I don't know about you, but there's not a lot that I won't do for ice cream. Klondike bar syndrome is real.
So what about the name, David Koresh? Why would Vernon Howell's not a bad name? I mean, I don't have any issue with that name. Why change it to David Koresh?
Well, it's funny you should ask that because, like I said, this man very much believed he was who he said he was. So he got King David from the Bible. Plain and simple. Man thought he was a lot more than he was. And he got Koresh, which is a Hebrew name of Cyrus, described by Isaiah as Messiah appointed by God.
I actually think I read somewhere that he actually had a child that he named Cyrus too. So, I mean, it fits with that. I mean, if you're naming your child that.
Well, if the numbers are correct here, I read he had 16 kids. And I know there's like adoption there, but you're going to find out he got around.
He was pretty fond of the women in his commune or compound.
He shared. It's a thing that most cult leaders have in common. Jim Jones did it. It's just.
I think I've seen where he said he was taking the burden of sex because he wanted the other followers to basically they could put all their focus on the Bible, focus on all his teachings, and then
he handles the hard stuff. He
takes that burden for them.
He's a real champion. He's a real people's champion.
Going back to being charismatic, if you're convincing somebody to hand over your wife to them and basically follow everything you say blindly, you're pretty high level speech, I would say.
I think so, and I think he brought some good ice cream to the table. He had to be bringing Bluebell.
They also said that some of the people I read said he didn't come across as overly smart. Like it wasn't like he was some sort of genius and anything like that. I actually read one where it said he was, because of the way his intelligence come across, that it could only be divine intervention that he knew so much about the Bible. Because he basically could quote all the scriptures is what they said.
Well, I know that he grew up with a learning disability. His mom was 14 when she gave birth to him. And so he grew up with a learning disability that he was very bullied for. And I think he even had like a speech impediment.
Yeah, I think I read that too.
I think, if I'm not wrong here, his Bible studies and going over the Bible and how he learned it and stuff, it helped when he would preach and stuff. It helped his speech impediment.
But then I read other stuff. He's doing all that, but he brings beer back to the compound. He's going to the bar, like still going out singing, hanging out. I mean, I guess he's just taking all the burdens from them,
You can see videos, and I think it's in the compound. It's not even like a karaoke night. He's up there, and he's rocking out. He's playing guitar and singing, and he's not like doing like rock versions of gospel or nothing. This dude's up there, Def Leppard. I mean, he's up there.
He wants to be a showman. He definitely wants attention, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Followers, he had a bunch. I mean, like we said earlier, he had basically like a concubine of women. He had, I don't know how many wives he had. You said he had up to 16 kids. I mean,
the thing he had written down, and it was kind of confusing when I read about it, but he had made this doctrine where I think he needed 23 descendants.
23, yeah, that sounds right.
And I'm pretty sure it was 23 from different women. And it would basically marry women of the cult to him. I mean, we're talking like if this woman's married, if she's single, it don't matter. She's David's.
So he's finding them new descendants from all the women in his compound. But there's a little issue with some of the descendants is that their moms aren't real old. He kind of liked a few people on the young side, it appeared.
There was an investigation in 1992. It's pretty much because of this. But like what's been said is no quote-unquote real evidence turned up. But what I'm thinking and what's highly speculated is the cult covered it up. Because there was one girl in particular that they were saying they confirmed was underage, but another member claimed credit as being her husband.
I read one story that said that he had, which I don't know what the time frame was. I don't know if it was at the very start. He actually married a 14-year-old, but the parents actually gave permission. So was it technically legal? Is it still kind of ick? Yeah.
I don't know if it's still like that in Texas. I don't quite know.
I don't know.
I've never really wanted to look that up because I ain't got no reason to. But
whether it's legal or not, I'm going to go ahead and tell everybody this. If you have a daughter that's 14, do not give your authority for them to be married. They can wait till they're 2021. Not even a reason at 18. Just wait it out. We'll see how it goes.
Especially to a man like Dave Koresh.
No, I wouldn't do that.
A dude shows up to your house with a Def Leppard shirt tucked into his jeans with his glorious curly, what was it? He had a mullet.
I think he had a mullet.
Shut the door.
Kentucky waterfall. It was kind of curly, so.
If he were alive today, he would wear pit vipers. That would be it. Just pit viper sunshades. That's.
I think so. Pit vipers, cut off shirt or shorts, and I'm going to go ahead and guess a cut off flannel button up is what I'm going to say.
Put Travis Tritt to shame.
Yeah, maybe some combat boots. Just shredding that axe,
He'd be a TikTok star for sure.
So all this investigation into this child abuse, it really never turned anything, did it?
No, not really. But that's not why the feds were into him to begin with.
It was a little they had a little fetish for guns, I hear.
A little bit. Just a tad bit.
They said he went to, I guess members went to the gun shows, selling guns, trading guns. I don't know if they changed them. I've seen reports where they're saying they had converted ARs over to fully auto, do all kinds of different stuff. I mean, they were basically just collectors of the firearms.
Basically, he was the first Pokemon collector. But
he wanted them all. Got to grab them all.
He's got to fill that dex up. This is where it gets kind of weird research-wise because different research is biased against different parts.
I guess what is the whole point of all the guns? He's just I wouldn't assume he's just a huge collector. There's a reason why is he getting all these guns.
He was preparing. He really like it goes back to the beliefs even way before he took over. the end of days. Because even before him, Benjamin Roden, he had a specific date that he thought was going to be the end. And it was actually April 22nd, 1955, I believe.
That kind of passed up. Huh?
Yeah, it
Hey, he had one. I think Lois had one. I mean, Crash, was he the third one? Third time's a charm.
something.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean, and this is something that even outside of cults, you hear about doomsdays every day. You know, there's 2020, was it 2012?
yeah, the Mayan in their calendar ending. There's always a finality date. You know, so they're always looking forward to something, and then.
But this man believed God told him exactly when it's going to happen. And he wanted to be what he thought was prepared, so he stockpiled quite a bit.
They were, there was a lot of revelation teaching. A lot of seventh seal kind of stuff is what he was kind of preaching there at the end. I think he said that he expected to end basically in a fight with the ATF and sort of like a fire. He kind of thought that was going to happen, which...
I mean...
If you're getting investigated by the ATF and you're stockpiling weapons and you have a little problem with authority, there's a pretty good chance you're going to have some conflict with them eventually. If you're all the roads kind of head to that one path.
If you know anything about this era too, it was peak, like Ruby Ridge had happened, the same year? The year prior?
Yeah, it was about a year and a half or so before that. They had Ruby Ridge. They actually had came and they disliked that guy owning a little too many weapons, and then they got a little quick to the trigger.
Yeah, they did not like...
Allegedly. I'm saying allegedly.
They did not like some of the modifications he made of what I hear. Sawn-off shotgun, yada, yada. That's a different story, but... It's all kind of related.
Yeah, it's related because it kind of went bad too. His wife got shot, his son got shot. I mean,
his dog was the first victim.
Yeah, that correlates, and then that's kind of how we ended up in this spot, right? The Ruby Ridge happened. ATF, they're sort of looking for some sort of good publicity. They want to.
The ATF and the FBI, because these are both the people on both of these sieges. There's officials that were the same. So the same officials led some of the same sieges. We
sort of know what was going on inside the compound. We know what he's doing. He's allegedly messing with kids or stockpiling weapons.
There was also allegations of physical abuse to kids as well.
Abuse, yeah.
Like somebody was seeing him apparently spanking a kid too much and too hard.
Yeah. And then all of that Ruby Ridge with their kind of issues with that, the FBI and ATF's issues with that all kind of puts us at a head. That kind of leads to the February 28th, 1993, the first day of the siege, the big one, It sort of happened where they came up, their news crews somehow found out about it. I would assume to help with getting the word out that the ATF, FBI, we're coming in here. We're going to be the good guys, get this guy out of here. And that's going to be the end of it. They're trying to help themselves.
What was crazy is before all of this too, Dave had been investigated multiple times by the feds, but apparently he had the town's police force charmed. They would go up and shoot guns with them. They would go to their range and shoot with them.
I think he had them come into the compound. I mean, he was either some of the stuff like that wasn't happening as much, or he's just, which I don't necessarily think probably happened. He's probably just such a brazen person that he thinks, hey, I can get away with anything. I can do anything. I run this branch Davidians. I'm sort of the king of the castle here, So.
And this is where it gets complicated too, because this story is told by so many different people. You'll find that people on both ends have survived, different witnesses have survived, and it's different biases telling different tales. Some, it's not exactly a tale of good versus evil, because it's not that black and white here.
No, it's kind of Koresh, he seemed like a bad guy. He seems like,
like most cult leaders. I don't,
But then it's do you hold the actions of all these brainwashed people, you hold that against them?
See, because growing up, I used to think, how could you be involved with a cult? It's stupid. But at the end of the day, these people, you can't really call them stupid, especially if they were born into it. There were people born into this.
Yeah, and I think even the other people that weren't born into it, I think everybody's kind of looking for their own little place in life. They want to connect to people. They want to fit in with people. You can understand it.
From what I heard, they had their own community. They worked together. They were basically a big family. But They had a very shady leader.
So if you have a charismatic leader, of sort of a core belief of ideas, I mean, hey, there's your recipe to start you a cult, you know? But let's go back to the first day. The news crews are getting there. The ATF is coming down the road. The FBI, everybody's coming up, showing up. And then, but Koresh, he knows they're coming. I mean, something happened. A news reporter was actually lost trying to get to this compound out in the middle of nowhere and happened to see a rural mail carrier and asked him, "Hey, ever heard of this Koresh guy or this Mount Carmel? I'm trying to check it out." Well, of course, he finds out what's going on. He just so happens to be a follower of David Koresh.
See, and that was a kind of a different thing about this cult. You could take jobs outside of the compound.
Yeah, you weren't just locked in there.
Because like with Jonestown, you had to work in Jonestown.
Hey, you need a little money for guns, you know. Got to get out there and work.
Hey, guns ain't cheap.
No. Then the raid, it basically starts. They have, I think it said cattle trailers full of agents getting pulled up to the front of it. They're getting dropped off. They're making a big show out of it. I don't know how many dozens of reporters were there. There's tons of people. They got all eyes on them right now. And then the controversy of the first day is not too long after everybody jumps out of their vehicles, and you have, I think it was 75 ATF agents. Somebody shoots, but who shoots?
That's still the most contested thing I ever hear about it is who shot first. It's literally a start. Bringing it back to movies. Did Han Solo shoot first, or did Greedo shoot first? Still to this day, pretty much most of us, all of us, we don't know.
So the original reason for the raid, their warrant was for, it was illegal weapons, but also for some sort of abuse of children. That was what the warrant's for. That's what everything was.
I think there was even a point where they were trying to get him for the weapons a while back, and he invited them in to investigate. Because I think their biggest thing was him converting weapons semi to fully automatic, I believe. But I know at one point he invited them in. But this was before the siege. He invited like regular investigators in.
Well, then at the actual siege, the firefight kind of breaks out. You know, news crews rolling, everybody's filming. It's just turned into basically a war zone at that time. And then the ATF basically tries to bust down the doors and get inside for 2 hours. What I read was that the reason it slowed down was because they actually run out of ammo. That's how much they were shooting. But then after all that dust is kind of settled after the first thing, we have 4 ATF agents and 5 Davidians were killed.
That's already 9 people. And that's the first day.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, for a warrant on one person, that's pretty wild.
We should also specify that how many people lived in that compound? It was well over 100.
Yeah, it was well over 100 people.
He had branched, no pun intended, he had branched off and taken over 100 so followers with him.
So basically during all of this standoff, the hostage rescue team was there. They had snipers. And a lot of these people were actually people who were at Ruby Ridge. That's kind of why we brought that up earlier. There's a lot of the same connections of people. So after the first day, after those 4 ATF agents were killed, that's when the FBI, they sort of took over and said, "Hey, we'll kind of take the reins from this. Y'all kind of made a blunder of this again."
And the ATF is mad. I mean, you know, they lost 4 of their compatriots, their buddies. They're out for blood here at this point.
So during the siege, you have different, hostage negotiators, different people trying to get people out. They're talking to David. I think he got shot a time or two during the standoff. And then they try to get people out. He kept wanting to write his manifesto, and he was kind of stalling them, saying once he got that, he would come out, but they wanted to get people out of there. I think it said they eventually got 19 kids out of there, which I think there were some adults too. I actually think the first one was an adult.
There were people that wanted to leave and people that wanted to stay. And the wild thing is about this one, especially when you compare it to other recorded cult tragedies in history, there's so much footage and audio of this. You can listen to the phone calls from Dave Koresh to the hostage negotiator. There was one that was actually really friendly with him. They kind of developed a bond, but you could hear Dave like getting worse and worse health-wise. But the guy was begging him, hey, let's end this. And Dave was trying to get hostages out, but at the same time, he could have made it a little bit easier here, but he kept wanting to write that manifesto. Basically, his almost like commandments, his words.
So there's really no way to know if he forced these people to stay, if they could have left if they wanted to.
Because he was telling them, we just want to let them out. But at the same time, it was kind of like a human shield type thing for him to get this out, because to the end he believed himself. He believed everything he said to the end.
So finally, after 51 days of this, we reach an end point. We have April 19th, 1993, and that's when the FBI decided, we're tired of waiting for this manifesto. We're tired of waiting for your notes, your story. We're done with this. I'm sure they were getting pressure. They said Janet Reno was telling them to go ahead and stop this. I think stuff was coming from Bill Clinton. I mean, they wanted this to end. You had 51 straight days of nothing but bad press on the TV, everybody's TV in the nation, showing that this group of extremists has fought off basically the U.S. government for 2 months.
Almost 2 months, yeah.
So the FBI, they move in. They got armor-piercing rifles. We're
talking like 50 cal snipers.
50 cal snipers. We have combat engineering vehicles, CVs, which are, when I looked at the pictures, they look like a tank without the cannon on the
Basically
front.
An APC.
So they've got them. They're driving around. They decide what's the best way to get somebody out of a compound that don't want to come out. Send in the gas. So they start cracking holes in the compound and pumping in gas, which that's not really a great combo, is pumping in gas. And then you've got people, I don't know how much they pumped in, but apparently quite a bit. And
I saw them shooting them with grenade launchers out too, like gas canisters in
yeah,
there.
they said there were two different kinds. I think the kind that they were pumping in was actually a powdered kind, is what I read.
Okay.
And then they said the other ones they were shooting, which that gets you to the big issue of this, a big controversy. A fire erupts. And then it's 3 fires. It's about noon on the last day. 3 fires break out in 3 separate locations. Do you think that the Davidians, do you think they started those fires? Do you think they were from the tear gas?
You can't really tell, because I've heard reports that the powdered gas was highly flammable in like a way like how coffee creamer is highly flammable. And I ain't a scientist, by the way. I'm a little stupid, but I'm just gonna
Here
say,
with Dr. Dillon, scientific guy.
Just that's one of the things I hear. I don't really see them all agreeing to want to set themselves on fire, especially because there were still kids in there and mothers who they wanted out bad.
See, that's kind of the issue, is that one of the big issues they started with the whole raid was because children were in danger, and then
they put them in more danger.
Then you just start gassing them.
Yeah, that's just...
I don't know what the effects of tear gas is on somebody. I don't know how bad it would harm you, but I would guess pumping enough into into an area that's locked down with people, it might be hard to breathe in there.
And I know they had I think they had a shelter, like an underground shelter or something, but I can't remember if it was blocked off or if they were blocked in.
Someone said that it was damaged. They thought that it could have been damaged from one of the CEVs, and maybe some of the women and children were actually locked in there where they couldn't escape.
Okay, yeah, because this whole time they're running through the house with the CEV.
And then you get into the fire started, which they had high winds that day, so within minutes the whole thing's lit up. It looks like an old-fashioned bonfire out there. And then you have, you would think the fire department or somebody would come in, they would try to put it out, but from what I read, it said that the fire department basically was stopped. They couldn't come in there. It was unsafe, which you could say, you got extremists in there with rifles. Maybe they might shoot at you. You don't want to put your firemen at risk. Out of all this, what ends up happening is there was 85 cult members still inside. When they were actually raging, there was 9 people who escaped. So with the first day, we had 4 ATF agents die. There was, I think, 16 injured. There was 6 Davidians who died on the first day. But then there were 76 people who died on that last day.
Including David Koresh. Which it was either a mercy killing, bullet to the head from what I hear, or his wounds from burning alive. That's what I've constantly read. Is that I know the autopsy showed that he had a large size hole directly in his forehead that was within, he had the other place he'd been shot, I think in the hand and somewhere in the torso, but then he had been shot in the head. I actually read another story that said that his friend, who finally at the end kind of realized, hey, this is kind of a bad situation, you were a liar, because he was shot, David Koresh was shot in the head, and then the guy next to him it appeared that he had shot himself. So it makes you wonder, did he say, let me shoot you and then I'll shoot me and it'll end all this? Or did he realize at the end, hey, this guy was lying to me, I'm taking my revenge. You got me in a bad spot. You stole my wife. You got her pregnant. And now I'm shooting you, The thing about it is like the only people that were in there, if any of like the current survivors, I don't think they're going to remember everything 100% correct.
No.
Or they won't be 100% believed in the fact that they were under gas and fire.
No,
you're not going to be at your full.
No, all that chaos, you're not. People don't remember easy stuff. When you have all that stuff going on, I think you're just going to form thoughts out of it, try to remember. But what another crazy fact about the people who got out, they actually charged them. The ones that they got out, they charged them with crimes. I think there was 8 were convicted of firearms charge, 5 convicted of voluntary manslaughter, and 4 people were acquitted of all charges. I guess they are still trying to make it look like there was actual reason. The ATF was making it look like there was a reason that they were there, and the FBI, and there was a point to all this, but it seems kind of strange that they still charge those people escaping the fire.
What always was crazy to me is at the last day, you could see the footage of them taking down the Branch Davidian flag and putting up their flag.
Yeah. So
that always kind of felt like they were kind of taunting them, kind of spitting on them.
I definitely see how it's sort of a government overreach of using that excessive of force, especially when they said that he went to the bar. He went and met these people in the community. He was out and about. If they had a warrant on him, you would think they would just picked him up somewhere when he was in town. It's not like he was locked in. Like you said earlier, the people had jobs. They were out and about.
Yeah.
They could have got some of these people separately. I think they wanted to put up a show of force, and I think it just took a really, really bad turn. Because in the same token, if I was an ATF agent and then I've assumed this person's in there abusing kids, he's stockpiling weapons, he's doing all this stuff, and then I have friends that get killed on the first day, you can see, they're out for blood.
And that's why it's really hard to say anything in like a black and white perspective. It's all real gray what happened on that day. There was wrongdoings on both ends. Definitely.
I think it was just a bad time. It was a bad situation and a bad time for our country. You want to hold. Of course, you want to hold somebody like David Koresh accountable. He's a bad dude. We're not going to argue with that. He did a lot of bad stuff, but then you also want to kind of hold your government to a higher standard, and you don't want them to come in and just bully anybody they want to.
And like I said earlier, there's survivors of this on both ends, and you can listen to interviews from all of them. Who you choose to believe, who you choose to think is correct, that's on you. But This is one of the most well-documented cult-related things in our history, and you can see it from both sides.
You basically have 51 days of just video footage. I mean, the news was there every day. They were covering it every day. It's like watching something in real time. I mean, you didn't have social media back then to just keep in touch with what everybody's doing at every moment of the day. But a story like this, as long as you had a TV back then, you basically could see what's going on the whole time. It kind of captured the world.
I imagine this being one of those things too, where if you want to watch a different TV station, you go to that station, but this cuts in.
No,
like this was such a big thing.
It was on everything.
You're trying to watch Flipper, and this cuts in.
Sorry, Flipper. Got to see what the Davidians are doing. Yeah, so that's basically the story of the siege of Waco.
We summarized a lot and skipped around a lot, but that's because unlike Alligator Joe or even Goatman, this is so well documented. Everybody's got podcast episodes about it. There's people that do full podcast episodes about this. There's documentaries about this. We're just covering it because it's a big Texas legend.
Yeah, but it's the story that needs to be told. It's sort of how Koresh is tied with Waco. This situation is tied with Texas.
And it also even ties in with like an Oklahoma legend.
Yeah, because, actually out there were supporters of Koresh. There was, people who didn't support him. There was all different peoples who were gathering around the actual compound. And one of those people was Timothy McVeigh. He actually was there. He was selling bumper stickers. He had a problem with Ruby Ridge. He had a problem with this.
He was long already at his extreme state, and this really, really sent him over the edge. I mean, he was, even like when he was in the military, they were like, you could do a whole episode on Timothy McVeigh. Yeah. He was something else.
Yeah, we're not going to go into him all the way because that's another thing. We're doing the state of Texas, but it does show you how it correlates these events: Ruby Ridge, Waco, Oklahoma City bombing.
For those that don't know, Timothy McVeigh was the Oklahoma City bomber, which he did in retaliation to this because he felt he was getting revenge on the government. So he bombed a federal building. So
it is connected. It's crazy. It's crazy. But I think with that, we're ready to wrap this up. We had, the Alligator Man, Joe Ball, we had Goatman, we had God's Man, I guess. I don't know what you call Koresh.
All Texas has to offer. We had goats, gun, God, and Gators.
We get a little bit of all in Texas, but like we said earlier in the podcast, what we're going to try to do is we're trying to put out an episode every week. What we're going to do is jump from different states. We're not set on the next state for sure right now. Make sure you tune in, find out what the next state we take you to is. If you have any suggestions, you can send us an email. It's at contact@stateoflegends.com. That's our email address. Tell us if you have stories about this or other suggestions for different states, different stories on different states. Just let us know.
Even stories of your own. If you have had an experience Goatman related, we'd like to hear it.
Yeah, send us your Goatman stories. Send us all that. I mean, if you remember watching Waco all in the news back in that time, tell us about it. Contact us, tell us any stories, just anything you'd like.
And this is the first of at least 50 episodes.
Yeah, so we got at least 50 in the line now.
We got spin-offs planned more than likely. Might do some gaming. Just buckle up. Take this trip across America with us.
All right. With that, I think we're going to end this. Thanks for listening. We hope to see you next week.